Strange meat and strange meat pie. Strange meat is exactly what it sounds like, which is also exactly what you're afraid it is. It looks like meat, tastes like meat, skewers nicely onto a stick, and restores a modest chunk of your health along with a small dose of radiation. The only catch being that it's almost certainly human, a fact that the game eventually confirms once you dig into Andale's little secret. The strange meat pie is the same product, just ground up and baked into pastry form by Linda Smith, a sweet housewife in the town of Andale who will hand you a fresh one every single day, like you're her grandkid stopping by after school. And the reason Linda has such a steady supply is because Andale happens to contain the largest single stockpile of strange meat in the entire game, which is spread across fridges in basements, kitchens, and a very suspicious garden shed that has tools no normal shed should have. As for where the meat comes from, the story is that 4 families, hid in fallout shelters during the Great War, ran out of food, and collectively decided the solution was to start munching on travelers. 200 years later, they're still at it, except now the families are so intermarried that Old Man Harris quietly admits that the family tree is a straight line. However, Jack Smith defends the whole operation with patriotic speeches about hardworking American families and Chinese commies, while his wife is in the kitchen folding a guy into a pie crust. Bob's Iguana Bits. In the downtown hub, just south of the Merchant Market, there's a friendly little food stand run by a friendly little man named Bob Frazier, who will happily sell you an iguana on a stick or a skewer of prime iguana bits for a reasonable price. The prime cut selected iguana bits are the premium option, marketed as the higher quality selection for customers with refined tastes. But the only complication is that none of it is actually iguana. Bob's supplier is a man named Doc Morbid down in Junktown, a shady physician who's been shipping meat off his operating tables and into the hub for years. The Vault Dweller can figure this out and actually blackmail Bob for hush money. But the absolute cherry on top is that Bob's legacy continues into Fallout 2, where his son Mikey opens up a stand in New California Republic called Son of Bob's Iguana Bits, which raises the uncomfortable question of whether Mikey knows what his dad was really selling, or whether the family business has an unspoken tradition being passed down. Cook's Fiend Stew. Cook's Fiend Stew is a thick, meaty stew that restores health for a full minute, boosts your strength for 2, and in hardcore mode, knocks out a brutal chunk of your starvation meter in a single bowl. The recipe calls for 2 beers, a hunk of Brahmin meat, a fresh potato, and a jalapeno pepper, which almost sounds like a completely respectable chili you'd eat at a Texas cookout. You find the recipe sitting on a shelf in a Fiend encampment outside the west entrance of the South Vegas ruins, along with most of the ingredients laid out nice and tidy, which is a generous touch considering the Fiend encampment is defended by Cook himself and his gang of heavily armed raiders. The only ingredient the recipe doesn't specify is where the Brahmin meat comes from, and given that this is Cook's personal recipe, that's kinda sus. The world model for the stew also happens to look like a straight up piece of mole rat meat, and the Pip-Boy icon is also just a piece of meat, suggesting that whatever's actually in the bowl is not quite what the recipe card claims. Nuka-Cola Quantum. This is a bright blue soft drink that glows in the dark, and the reason it glows is because it's genuinely radioactive. The beverage was developed in late 2076 as part of a military project called Project Cobalt, where lead scientist Rex Meacham came up with a custom isotope of strontium-90, a real-world radioactive material, and suggested that instead of putting it in weapons, they should put it in a soda. The Food and Drug Association somehow signed off on this, and Quantum hit shelves with the tagline, "Twice the calories, twice the carbohydrates, twice the caffeine, and twice the taste," which technically doesn't mention the radiation at all. Drinking it causes your urine to glow, decreases your bone density over time, and in one case dyed a man's beard bright blue permanently. A kid named Zip at Little Lamplight says he once drank a full bottle, burped really loud, and then couldn't remember the next week of his life. The drink launched on the same day the bombs fell, which means almost every bottle in existence was either still in the factory or halfway to a store when civilization collapsed, making it one of the rarest consumables in the wasteland. The radiation is also potent enough that entire species of mutated animals, Nuka-Lurks and quantum radstags, exist specifically because they drank too much of it or lived near it for too long, and people still voluntarily pay for this. Sugar bombs. This one's a breakfast cereal shaped like tiny atomic bombs and was marketed with the slogan, "Explosive Great Taste," and containing 47 grams of sugar per serving. That 47 grams happens to be 100% of the recommended daily sugar intake for an adult human, meaning 1 bowl of sugar bombs at breakfast technically means you are supposed to eat no sugar for the rest of the day, which nobody in Fallout is doing. The cereal is advertised by Captain Cosmos and Stella Skyfire, 2 in-universe space adventure characters, who describe it as chock full of important vitamins and peps that every space captain relies on for energy, nutrition, and rocket fuel. Every box also comes with a free Captain Cosmos decoder ring, which is the kind of marketing that gets parents to buy their kids diabetes in a box. Vault 21 serves a variant called Aspartame Sugar Bombs as a breakfast item, which suggests an artificial sweetener attempt that went about as well as everything else in Vault Tech's portfolio. The cereal is a direct reference to the chocolate frosted sugar bombs from Calvin and Hobbes, and Tim Kaine has mentioned that sugar bombs appeared in his notes all the way back in the 1990s, but never made it into the original Fallout games. Nukashine. Nukashine is a high-proof moonshine brewed from Nuka-Cola Quantum and raw nuclear material, and the warning label on the bottle literally just says, "may cause blackouts." The recipe calls for 2 parts boiled water, 5 ears of corn, 3 chunks of nuclear material, 1 bottle of Nuka-Cola Quantum, 5 bundles of razor grain, and 5 pieces of wood. Drinking it gives you a massive sprint boost, increased falling speed, and 50% more AP regeneration for 2 minutes, after which you instantly black out and wake up in one of 36 random locations scattered across Appalachia. Some of those wake-up spots include a tightrope suspended between 2 cliffs, a raft floating in the middle of a lake, the top of a billboard, and most famously, a carriage next to 3 lifeless settlers, which is a direct Skyrim reference. Nukashine was invented in November 2076 by a frat bro named Lewis from the Eta Psi Epsilon Tau fraternity at Vault-Tec University, originally so he could fund his Nuka-Cola collecting hobby. The drink turned out to be so potent that it wiped out an entire rival fraternity during an eviction party, at which point his chapter president Judy Lowell decided the correct response was to set up a speakeasy and distillery in the basement of a tattoo parlor and start selling it to students. A sugar-free version does exist that skips the blackout effect entirely, because apparently the blackouts were caused by the sugar content and not the radioactive uranium byproduct floating in the bottle. Deathclaw Egg Omelette. The Wasteland Omelette is a breakfast dish made with a Deathclaw egg, a fresh piece of Lake Lurk meat, a crunchy mutt fruit, and a box of Blamco mac and cheese, whisked together and cooked over a campfire. It restores 12 health per second for a full minute at max survival skill, which works out to 720 health total from a single omelette, making it the single most effective healing food in the base game. The visual presentation is where the dish earns its reputation. The finished omelette has 2 full-size Deathclaw claws sticking straight out of the sides, still attached because the egg was apparently cooked with the embryonic claws intact. The recipe was created by a woman named Aunt Rose, and her niece, Jazz Wilkins, will give you both the recipe and a free sample as a reward for helping her with an unmarked quest in the Mojave. You can also just walk into the Ultralux casino on the Strip and buy one from the Gorman's food supplier, because apparently there's a steady enough supply of Deathclaw eggs to keep a high-end Vegas restaurant stocked. The whole concept is a direct callback to Fallout 2, where a woman named Rose in the town of Modoc ran a cafe and made omelets from eggs laid by a pet Deathclaw she kept in her backyard, which raises an entire ecosystem of questions about how she acquired, tamed, and extracted eggs from one of the deadliest creatures in the wasteland. Honestly, this is probably not the worst one here in the list, because people eat bears in real life, right? I guess that's about as close as you can get to eating a Deathclaw, maybe a polar bear, or maybe just don't make an omelet out of them. Cram. Cram is a canned meat product that is shamelessly, openly, and legally distinctly a parody of Spam, right down to the font on the label. The ingredient list officially includes heavy water, various salts, and pork byproducts, but pork byproducts is doing a lot of heavy lifting considering that the stuff stays edible for literal centuries and was used as the standard protein ration for deployed American soldiers, school lunches, and survivalist stockpiles. The taste is universally described by NPCs as gross, weird, and almost edible if properly processed, with one Brotherhood mess officer suggesting that if you fry it up with some Nuka-Cola, it almost tastes like food, which is not a ringing endorsement. Overindulging in Cram causes severe constipation. Robert McCready mentions spending 8 hours on the toilet after a bad can, and Rowdy at the Warwick homestead describes a busted pump as being clogged up like Zeke after one too many cans of Cram. Mole Rat Wonder Meat. Mole rat wonder meat is regular mole rat meat that has been chemically cured inside a metal box using industrial wonder glue, and the results are apparently fantastic. The finished product is 4 times more effective at restoring health than normal mole rat meat, gives off a nutty aftertaste, according to the notes left behind by its inventor, and strips out the natural bitter flavor that makes raw mole rat jerky taste like unwashed rodent. The inventor was a raider scientist named Ryan Brigg, who set up shop inside the Drury Street metro tunnels and built himself a custom machine called the Wonder Meat Maker, specifically for this recipe. Longneck Lukowski's canned meat. Longneck Lukowski's canned meat, also called potted meat, is a small Pelican-branded tin sold out of a cannery on the Boston waterfront, and it restores a generous 40 health per serving. The label advertises the contents as premium potted meat made from Brahmin, radstags, mole rats, and mongrel dogs, which is already a wide net for what counts as premium. The operation is run by a man named Theodore Collins, who rediscovered the pre-war cannery, got the automated robots working again, and started buying meat from local traders to process into cans. The problem is that the traders couldn't keep up with demand, so Theodore started supplementing the supply with mole rats from the basement, and then, when one of the machines exploded and flooded the basement with feral ghouls, he started processing those too. Yes, feral ghoul meat in the cans being sold to settlements across the Commonwealth. When the sole survivor shows up, Theodore is arguing with the trader about customers getting sick, and if you go investigate the basement yourself, he locks you inside to prevent you from telling anyone. The canned meat has a 25% chance to give you 25 rads when eaten, which ignores the lead belly perk entirely, a detail that makes perfect sense once you remember the main ingredient is glowing undead. There's also a random encounter where a settler flags you down to hand you his remaining cans of Lukowski's while suffering severe bowel issues, calling the product Longneck Lukowski's canned poison, and asking you to tell Lukowski he hopes he perishes in a fire. Bloatfly Slider. It's a small handheld burger made from the meat of a bloatfly, which for reference is a mutated insect the size of a large dog with a venom-tipped stinger that shoots projectiles at you. The recipe is dead simple. 1 piece of bloatfly meat, 2 prickly pear fruits, a campfire or hot plate, and a survival skill of at least 20, making it one of the first real healing foods a new courier can craft in the Mojave. It restores 3 health per second for 15 seconds, and in hardcore mode, it's one of the rare foods that meaningfully cuts into both your thirst and hunger meters at the same time, which makes it genuinely useful despite being, functionally, a bug burger. The ingredients are also conveniently stocked right next to each other in the Goodspring Cemetery, where bloatflies respawn regularly and prickly pears grow wild, meaning the game is essentially handing you a starter insect grill kit within the first hour of play. If you've got the Old World Blues add-on, a single legendary bloatfly drops over 50 pieces of meat, and combined with the ability to synthesize prickly pear fruit from Salient Green, you can mass produce these sliders to the point where they become more cost-effective than stim packs. Which one are you trying first after the bombs drop? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more Fallout lore dives.